Good afternoon and welcome to today's Wednesday webinar. It's January 9th and today's topic is Strive Analytics. I hope everybody had a great break and you're ready to jump back in. And we've got some cool things to show you in Strive and more cool things to come. So starting out this afternoon, you've got me, Paige Parker. I'm one of the training and implementation specialists, and also on the call today is Joel Adkins. Joel, say hi.
Hey everyone, happy 2019.
Yeah, that's hard for me. I've already written it wrong twice. So welcome, and we're going to go ahead and jump right in. Before we start our topic, I want to remind you about some upcoming trainings and events that we have going on. There are 4 more region events happening this spring. These are free training conferences that happen at the regional service centers. Region 3 is having theirs in Victoria on the 23rd. Region 4 and 5 are doing a combined conference this year because it's Region 4's first year to be a partner, and that combined conference will be in Beaumont on February 13th. Region 13 in Austin is February 22nd, and Region 9 is going to be on March the 7th. So these are opportunities for you to get some free training and attend sessions that are specifically about Eduphoria. So check them out. You can go to our online help and go to upcoming training events, which is the title you'll see in the upper left-hand corner. That link will take you to all the information that you need, and then you can click on any of those boxes to register for that event. Again, those are free events offered by the service centers. And then we also have a couple of upcoming conferences. Midwinter is happening in Austin, January 27th through the 30th. And then the big event is TCEA. It's in San Antonio this year. And if you're at either one of those conferences, please stop by our booth. We're there to answer questions, show you cool stuff. And we usually have a game to play and some swag for you to pick up. So stop by and see us if you're at either of those. Also, we like to remind everybody where you can find help. After today, the end of the presentation has some links, and so we're going to save this presentation as a PDF, and we'll attach it to the email that you receive so that you'll have those links. But also, just as a reminder, you can click on Help in any of the locations in our applications and get to the resources that we have out there. And we have articles that walk you through the things that we're going to talk about today. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, first of all, if you have questions, there is a questions window in your dashboard, the control panel for GoToWebinar. If you'll put the questions there, Joel is going to be answering questions in the background. And woohoo is right. And then sometimes if he's getting a question from multiple people, he might jump in and ask that question out loud so that we can talk about it with everybody. But if you'll put your questions there, then we'll get answers for you one way or the other. And our agenda for today is to talk about Strive Analytics. We're going to talk about how you can analyze a specific domain or dimension and look at the data for your district, dimension by dimension, if you want to. We're going to talk about how you can examine different documents in your process and see if you're getting from those documents what you want to be getting. We're going to look at how you can compare different groups within your district or even school, how you can calibrate your appraisers and look at how they're doing, how they're assessing on those same areas. And then we're going to talk about how to make sure you're set up to get the data that you want, because with analytics, you only get out what you put in. So we have to make sure things are set up in order for this data to show for you. Okay. The first thing we're going to talk about is how to analyze a specific domain or dimension. So I'm going to go into my demo site and click on Strive. And I'm in as an administrator with administrative rights. Come on, Strive, open up. And so if you have administrative rights, you should be able to see everything that we're going to look at today. I'm going to go over to the left-hand side and click on Reports. And under Reports, you have the appraisal reports that have always been there. They were there in PDOS, they were there in Appraise, they're there in Strive. But we also have a new link I say new, it's been there for about a year, but not everybody noticed it right away. So this is the appraisal analysis, and that's where we're going to go today. Appraisal analysis is more of a live data, um, gives you different views of your data as opposed to a report that you might want to print out. So this is going to give you a closer look, and as we continue to build in appraisal analysis, you'll be able to drill down even further. So this is the screen that you get when you click on appraisal analysis, and you can go in and decide what you want to see. And you have all of these different options for choosing the data that you want to have visible to you. The first thing that we're going to do is analyze a specific domain or dimension. So I'm going to start in the upper left-hand corner in the frameworks box, and I have to select a framework. And there's going to be a drop-down menu there. All of you have the T-TEST and T-PEST frameworks. Those were something that we created and put in the system. They're available to you. Whether or not you have your documents tied to them or not, that's one of the things that determines what shows up here. So we're going to talk about that toward the end, how to make sure that you are seeing the same kind of data that I'm seeing. I also have some additional frameworks set up in my demo site. You may or may not have those. You don't have to have a framework unless it's something that you're measuring over time. And T-TEST and T-PEST are really the ones that are commonly measured over the entire year with multiple different documents that go into the process. So I'm going to pick T-TEST because we're going to talk about looking at that teacher data right now. And when I select T-TEST, it shows me all of the domains and dimensions in that particular framework. I can select as much or as little as I want to here. So I could say right now, I have an immediate, this very moment concern about how student behavior is being handled on my campus, and I just want to look at 3.2 and see what we're seeing as a campus or as a district. So I can select just that one dimension if I want to and see some data about that dimension. Or I could go in and say, I need to know how we're doing with the instructional domain. So I'm going to click on the domain dot instead of a specific dimension dot. When I click on that one, it's going to select for me all of the dimensions in domain 2. So that's what I'm going to work with today for this particular one. I want to analyze a specific domain or dimension. I'm going to pick domain 2. The next thing I need to choose is over here in the middle panel, what do I want to look at? What's going to be my focus? And again, I can do as much or as little as I need to for what I'm trying to find out. Right now, I want to know how instruction is being presented on our campus, and also how are my teachers growing in that particular domain. So I'm going to select goals, professional development, and observations as the 3 things that I want to look at to see what's happening in that instructional domain. What are we seeing in the classroom? What are the teachers doing? And how do those things relate to one another? Over on the right-hand side, you can select a time period, and the default time period is always going to be your instructional calendar dates. So somebody in your district goes in during the summer and they set up the days that school starts and school ends. That's your instructional calendar, and that's what's going to show up by default. But I can make a change. And for today, I'm going to make a change and go back and say I want 2017 through now, because I want to get a fuller amount of data. So when you go in and look at your data today after this is over with, or while I'm talking, because I know how y'all are, but when you go in and look at your data, you may not see everything I'm seeing because you haven't gotten to the summatives yet, or you may not have all of your observations in yet. So for a single school year, you might not have as much data showing as what I'm showing now because I am using a 2-year window. But when you get to the end of the year and your summatives are done, then you'll see all of that data for the year. When you do it mid-year like this, that's why I'm picking a longer window. So I'm going to scroll down, and I have some other options down here. I can select, and for this one, I'm only going to use one group. I'm going to go in and say I want a high school group. So I'm going to pick my high school, and then I'm going to say which appraisee types I want. I want the T-test teacher full and T-test teacher waiver because those are my two teacher groups, and I want to make sure all my teachers are included. And then that's all I'm going to select. I want all subjects to be in there. I don't have to select them all. I don't have to click that button to select them all. They'll be there unless I narrow it down. So this is going to include all grades that are in this campus, all subjects that are in this campus, unless I decide to narrow it down some. So I'm just going to select that. And then toward the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a button that says Analyze. And I'm not going to click on the Analyze button right now, just because we're in a webinar and it takes a few minutes for this data to all render out and show you the display that we want to see, rather than having to tell jokes or whatever while it's waiting. I'm just going to click over here and show you what that would look like. So using those settings that I just showed you, picking the high school, picking all my teachers, and picking domain 2, this is what I'm going to see. So I can see up at the top, because I selected goals, professional development, and observations, I can see that 57 of my 238 teachers who set goals have a professional goal that's related to Dimension 2.1, achieving expectations. And I can see that 94 out of my 270 overall teachers have attended and earned some credit in professional development that was related to Dimension 2.1, achieving expectations. So knowing that we have goals and knowing that we have professional development, what would you expect to see when you look at the observation data? What I have here is a pretty nice little bell curve, which is kind of what I would hope to see from any of this data. So the majority of my teachers are proficient. I can again float over. Now this one I can't, it is not a live link, so it won't float. But normally when I float over one of these bars, it's going to show me this same information that's up here at the top of the goals and the professional development. It's going to show me how many out of how many. So when I see this, I can actually get numbers on here by floating my mouse over them when we're live. So by narrowing it down to that specific dimension or domain and saying exactly what documents I want to see, I can look at each one of the dimensions. If I was live, I would be able to scroll down and see this is 2.1, 2.2 would be below that, 2.3 would be below that. I would be able to see for each dimension what does our achievement look like, and then how does that relate to the teacher's goals and the professional development that they achieved. So if, for example, I had a larger number of developing and improvement needed and a smaller number of teachers with goals and professional development in this domain, that would tell me my teachers need some help and they're not getting it through professional development. So are we offering enough professional development in that particular dimension? Do I need to guide my teachers to write goals and work toward that dimension? So I can compare those things by using the settings that we talked about before. And again, I'm going to go back to Live Strive, and I can go into the framework analysis and look at those settings again and make whatever changes I need to after I've looked at that data. Any questions, Joel, so far?
So far, no
Okay.
questions. Lots of Happy New Year greetings.
Oh, yay! Happy New Year to everybody else. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go to our next report, which would be examining different documents in your process. So in this first example, I was looking at observations, which is a document, and comparing it to goals and professional development, which are not documents. That's just data that comes from another part of the system. This time, I want to look at comparing some specific documents and see how the data looks. So on this one, I'm going to add in this time 2 and 3. So I might use this particular type of view if I want to look at my entire instructional portion of the T-test framework. I'm going to take off goals and professional development, because what I want to see now are walkthroughs, observations, and summatives to see how do we compare. Are they doing fantastic? Sometimes it's like kids and their assignments. They do fantastic on the homework, but when you get to the quizzes and the tests, that's when the things sort of change. Is it the same way here? Do they do fantastic on the walkthroughs, but not so much on observations and summatives? Or is it the opposite? They do fantastic on observations because they know you're coming, but not so great on the walkthroughs because those are not announced. So we're going to compare those three different documents and see how the results compare. I'm going to leave my date range to be a 2-year date range, again, just so that I'm getting data in all of those. If I didn't have a 2-year date range, nothing would show up for summatives because we haven't done summatives yet this year. I can leave my group the same. It's still going to be the high school. It's still going to be all of my teachers. And then I would click on the Analyze button, and I will go ahead and click on that, although it's not going to show good data because this is my demo site. That's why but I just wanted to show you what it looked like and how you can scroll down. So I could scroll down and see all of the individual items here, but I'm going to go back and show you one that actually has data in it because my demo will display, but it doesn't have good data to show what it should look like. So let's talk about what you're seeing here. On the left, you're seeing a walkthrough document and how it displays. And on the right, you're seeing the observation document and how it displays. And again, we're looking at dimension 2.1, just like we were when we looked at the goals and the professional development and the observations. So I'm seeing that same bell curve over here. And again, I would be able to float over my numbers. I'll show you here when I float over any of those bars, it would show me. Now, 0 out of isn't really helpful, but just so that you can see what it looks like, how you can scroll, and how you can float over to get those numbers. So I would be able to get those numbers here and see what the exact data is. The difference here is in the type of document. So this document on the right, the observation, uses matrix questions. And because it uses matrix questions, it's going to calculate those percentages and it's going to display all of the choices together in one graph. What you're seeing on the left is a walkthrough. And this walkthrough, and many of you are using one like this, uses checkboxes so that they go in and they check off the look fors that they saw and whether that look for is a 5. You see all the 5s here for 2.1. These are all the look fors and what it would be if they got a 5 for that look for. Here are all the 4 look fors. Here are all the 3 look fors, and then the 2s and 1s would be below that. So what you have to do when you're looking at 2 different kinds of documents is say, okay, these are all 5s. So I have 1 out of 29, 1 out of 129, that's 2 out of 129, 4 out of 120, 6 out of 129. So I have 6 out of 129 are 5s or distinguished. How does that compare to what my number is here? And if I could float over it and it said 6 out of 129, woohoo, they're in alignment. Not that I don't want to see growth or change, but just that they're not way out of whack. So there's not a huge difference based on the type of document. I'm seeing the same kind of results regardless of whether I'm looking at it in a walkthrough or I'm looking at it in a formal observation. So I would have to go through and add up my numbers here, 6 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8. I'm missing one. So I'd have to add up my numbers there and then float over and see my numbers here to see how they compare. So it's not exactly apples to apples, but you can compare it because you are going to see numbers here. And then, like I said, you will be able to float over and see numbers there. So that's going to give you the data that you need to compare those 2 kinds of documents if you want to see how they're doing. Sometimes you might want to compare between walkthroughs, observations, and summatives, which should be a combination of the walkthroughs and observations. So you can do that as well. You just go in and choose those settings. Any questions about comparing documents?
We've had some questions about people not able to find how you got to those graphs. Like,
Okay, I'll go back over that again because I'm back on that screen right now.
sure.
So when I'm in Strive, I'm going to click on the reports over here on the left-hand side, and let me just go back into something that looks familiar. Hopefully everybody is familiar with the dashboard. So this is the campus view. When I go in as an administrator, I'm going to see I'm seeing my whole district. I can come over here and see all of my schools over here. This is the dashboard for one of my elementaries, but from any campus view that I'm in, once I land on this page, I will have the reports option over here, and then appraisal analysis is where I'm going to go to get to that data. So when I go to appraisal analysis, it's going to open up this screen that allows me to choose the data that I want to create the graphs that I want. So I can go up here to my pencil. This is the last one that I was looking at. If I want to make a change, I'll go up here to edit. And down at the bottom left, there's a button that says clear all. This is what it will look like when you first go in there. Nothing will be selected. You'll just have this dashboard to select what you want to include in the graphs, the charts that you're going to see. So again, I'm going to go up to the framework and choose t-tests. And then from that framework, I can choose whatever I want to see. In this next one, the next example, we are going to look at, if I could turn the page, how to compare different groups. So I'm going to choose domain 2 again and say we're focusing on instruction right now, but we want to compare 2 different groups in our district to see how that data lines up. So I would select what I want to see in the report. Again, I could select everything. That's going to be a lot of scrolling, I'll tell you that. For me, it's better to look at one thing at a time and focus in on that one domain or even one dimension and really understand what that data says than to have all of it in one place and have to scroll through all of those different options. The next panel is the focus. What do I want to look at? And so in this example, because I'm comparing different groups, I want to look at the overall. So I'm going to look at summatives only in this next example. And I'm going to look at different, I'm going to compare high schools to middle schools to elementaries and see how our teachers did. And I'm going to use the summative to give me that, because the summative should be everything combined. It should include their professional development. It should include everything that they've done all year long. So I'm going to use that as the comparative piece. I can choose whatever time period I want. And as I said earlier, I'm using a 2-year window because we haven't done summatives yet this year. And so I'm going back to 17-18 to get those summatives in order to have enough data. For districts, you can do that. If you use the same summative document at the end of the year last year that you're going to use this year, then you could do a 2-year window and compare that way also. Or you could wait until the end of the year when you do your summatives and get the data there. But I just wanted you to know that if you go in today and you try to run this report, you may not see your summatives because you haven't done them yet. I'm seeing them because I'm going back and grabbing last year's. Okay, so for this one, we're going to compare different groups. We've just been looking at one group of teachers, or really all of our teachers, all of our t-test teachers, but not comparing them, just looking at their data. Now I'm going to create some groups, and you'll notice it says right here group 1, and that's where it's been putting stuff. So when I go in and say I want this school and I want all my teachers from that school, it puts them in the group. And that's great. That's how I can see their data. But if I want to compare that, then I'm going to go in and say, in addition to Hogwarts, which is my demo school, I'm going to grab all of the high schools. So group 1 is going to be my high school group. And there, I think that's all the high schools I've got. Okay, so that's going to be my high school group. So I've got 3 campuses, and from those 3 campuses, I've got all of my teachers, full and waiver teachers. That's group 1. Then I'm going to scroll down, And below group 1, there's a button here that says additional group. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to make another group. This is going to be my middle schools, so I'm going to go grab middle school. There's a middle school, and I think there's one more. No, only 2 middle schools? Okay, so I have 2 middle schools. So that I'm going to pull my 2 schools in. Again, I want to say I just want my teachers. I'm not looking at campus staff or any other groups. I don't need my librarians. I just want my teachers right now. So I've got high schools in salmon, middle schools are gold, and then I'm going to go down and add an additional group. You can add up to 3. And this time I'm going to grab my elementary schools, and maroon elementary, orange, red, silver. Okay, so I've got all my elementary schools, and again, I'm going to narrow it down to just my teachers. So those are my 3 groups, and I want to know, how are my appraisers and how are my teachers evaluating or standing up to the evaluations across those groups. Sometimes you have a group that grades easier than others. Sometimes you have a group that scores better than others. I want to see that, and I want to do that comparison. So I would click on the Analyze button down at the bottom. This one would take a while because look at how many campuses it has to look at. So it's going to take a while for that view to render. To save time, I'm going to pop over here and show you what it's going to look like. So my high schools were the salmon colored, my middle schools were the gold color, and my elementary schools were the purple color. Those were my 3 groups. And you can see they are fairly consistent. There are some dips in different areas. At middle school, we have a few more distinguished and a few fewer developing than at some of the other levels. But the middle group, which is the majority of your teachers, look how straight that line is. That's surprising to me, but it's nice that they're close, because that tells me that all of my teachers across grade levels understand what the dimensions and domains are all about, and how to do that in the classroom. And all of my appraisers are observing those same things in the classroom and getting that pretty nice, almost exactly even bell curve across 3 different groups in the district. I can set those groups up to be whatever I want them to be. If I wanted one group to be English teachers, one group to be math teachers, one group to be science teachers, all on one campus, I could do that. I would just go back to Strive and I would change my settings. I can remove a group easily. I can come over here and click on this button, this drop down menu. Come on, drop down for me. Oop, there we go. And I can change my settings for that group. So I could say, let's just work with one school. And so I'm back to my one campus, but I'm going to say group 1 is going to be English teachers. Group 2, I'm going to get my same campus, same set of T-test teachers, but group 2 is going to be math. And then group 3 is going to be same campus, my T-test teachers, and this one is going to be science. Where is science? Oh, I have to scroll some more. There we go. So there's science. I know this question is going to come up, so at this time, you can do 3 groups, and that's it. So you can compare 3 different groups of people, or different, however you set them up. That is something that is being looked at for a future release, to have the ability to create additional groups. But right now you can compare 3 different ones. So I have my 3 groups set up, and I would click Analyze. I don't know what I'm going to get because this is my demo, but you can see I don't even have any math teachers that I have appraised. I have some language arts teachers and some science teachers that have been appraised, but in my demo site there are no math teachers, no data in group 2. So I can set those groups up however I want to compare, but that's going to give you, again, across school levels or across subject areas or whatever you want to compare, the ability to see, are we standardized? Are we on the same page? Okay, the next view that I wanted to show is about calibrating appraisers. So again, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go up to the top and click on my little pencil. Pencil is almost always an edit icon, so I want to go in and edit my settings. And again, I can remove these two groups and build something new. I'm not going to be looking at English teachers now. I'm going to be looking at something else. But I can keep my instruction if I want to. I can keep my summatives. In this case, I'm actually going to look at observations instead of summatives. So I want to change that, leave my time period the same just so that I get some data. But I'm going to open up those settings again. And in addition to saying that I want to focus on one school and I want to focus on these groups, I also want to focus on specific appraisers. So I'm going to scroll down and say I have a principal and an assistant principal at this campus, and I'm going to focus on how do they compare in terms of their evaluations. So I'm going to choose one, and then I'm going to make an additional group, and this group is also going to be same campus, same groups of teachers, but it's going to be my other appraiser from that campus. So now I'm going to compare how did these two appraisers, or how are they the same, how are they different in the way they're viewing the teachers. And so I would click Analyze, and what I would end up with is something that looks like this. Now this, I had 3 different appraisers in the site that I used to get my actual data. Oh, there we go. So these are my 3 different appraisers. And what are we seeing here? Well, I have one appraiser who has a large number of accomplished, but maybe this represents probably 1 or 2 when it's that small that are in any other area. So like almost everyone he appraised, he made accomplished. This middle appraiser, almost everyone he appraised, he made proficient. He has a few developing, almost none in the other areas. So when I look at this, I'm not so sure when I have a gap this large that these administrators are calibrated in terms of the way they're scoring. Now, it could be that the way their groups were assigned, maybe the purple appraiser got all the brand new teachers, or maybe got all the veteran teachers that are more accomplished, and the yellow teacher got a group that had more newbies in it so that they're not as highly rated. But we're kind of all over the place. So we have some high here, some high here. It's hard to tell. So I might want to have a conversation based on this about how are we rating? How are we coming to those decisions? Because I would expect to see it not exactly lined up like we saw in our groups, but not quite this much disparity as we see in the proficient category. That's a huge difference. So you can go in, and I know that different districts and campuses do different things, walk around with groups and try to appraise together and talk about it and all of that, but you can actually see some data here when you pull those appraisers' names in and compare them to one another. Are we really calibrated? Are we really evaluating the same way, or do we have big discrepancies like this? And if so, then what conversations can we have about that? Okay, any questions at this point, Joel?
No, not that I'm not answering.
Okay.
You're doing a great job of explaining everything very thoroughly.
Why, thank you. Okay, I want to go back to the dashboard and show you one other feature that's there. When you're on the framework analysis, up here at the top, there's actually 2 sections. There's framework analysis and document analysis. When you're on the framework analysis, you're going to see these pretty charts and graphs based on whatever selections you choose. So I'm going to choose my documents here under focus, but I'm going to have all these other choices and I get those charts and graphs. I also have the ability to go to document analysis and select a specific document from here. We do have a document analysis report, and this is very much like that document analysis report, but I can go in and I can say, I want to see specifically this walkthrough document, and then I can select my school and my teachers and analyze just that one document. Oh, no data. Sorry about that. But I can do a specific document analysis and show that information here if I want to. I can also, let me go back to my framework and pick instruction. I'm going to pick observations. I'm going to change my date range so that I have enough data in there. And I'll just grab what we've been looking at, one school, two sets of teachers, and I'm going to say analyze. Once I've analyzed it and I have my charts and I can scroll through and see, again, I don't have much data here because it's a demo site. But in addition to this view, which we've been looking at mostly today, there's also this little button, looks like a tablet over here, that you can toggle between chart and table. The charts are going to give you the colors and the nice bar graphs, but I can also go in and say, I just want to see it in a table. So if you're a numbers person more than you are a charts and graphs person, this might be the way that you want to view your data. It's going to show you the same information. I'm still looking at all of 2.1 here, and I can see what percentage of my teachers have that as an area of reinforcement or refinement, and then I can see what percentage of my teachers scored in each of those areas. I just don't see the bars and the colors. So it's just another way of viewing that same data. Some people prefer this. Some people prefer the charts and graphs. I'm a visual person, so I like the charts and graphs. I like the colors, and that helps me to understand it, but some people prefer just to look at the numbers, and you can do that by flipping over to table if you want to. Okay, so that's what we have now in the analytics section or appraisal analysis. There are some additional things coming. One of those is to be able to add additional groups or compare more than what we have available now. And another is to be able to drill down even further. So to go down to individuals rather than just English teachers, I'd be able to see that list of English teachers and drill down even further. So we're working on making that, giving you even more options to get to the data that you want to see here in the analysis. I did want to mention this one button, hide inputs. When you're looking at the data, sometimes you've got all this stuff. Here's all the stuff I selected, but I've got all this to scroll through. You can click hide inputs and it hides all that and gives you more screen real estate to look at the actual data. Sometimes that's nice after you get it up there. You want to see that chart nice and large. If I need to see how did I get that data again, I can click on show inputs and it'll tell you exactly what I selected. So that just temporarily gets it out of your way so that you can see the chart better. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is making sure that you're set up to get the data that you want. And there are a couple things to consider. One, your document types. When we looked at, let me go back to this one, we were looking at two different document types here when we compared our documents. Walkthroughs on the left, observations on the right. In this particular case, I could compare because I'd be able to float over and see a number here, and I'd be able to do the math to get a number from here and do some comparisons. So these documents, with a little work, you could compare. But sometimes when you're looking at a document, if your walkthrough is all comments and your observation is all matrix questions, sometimes it's hard to get the data that you want and compare and actually know, are teachers getting the same kinds of scores on walkthroughs that they're getting on observations, because the scores don't really translate. So that's one thing to consider. What data do you want to get out, and then plan your documents accordingly. The other two things to consider to make sure you're getting your data is, have you selected that framework in all of your documents? Because it has to be selected in the documents in order for that data to show up in the analytics. And also, have you tagged all your questions to the dimensions in your documents? This screenshot actually comes from one of our online articles, and I'll show you how to get to that in just a minute. But you can see that in the template, and this is a matrix based template. It's probably an observation document, and for each one of the rows in that matrix, I want it to say specifically which dimension it's tied to. And these say 1.1 standards and alignment. If it just says the word dimension and there's nothing after that, then you're not tagged and you're not going to get any data. So you would want to click on update row, select the row you want to update, and you'll see how it puts it up here at the top under the word matrix rows. And then down at the bottom, you'll select from the drop down list to tag that dimension and then click your update row button. That's how you do it. I'm going to go in and show it to you specifically in Strive. So I'm going to go into settings and appraisal settings, and I'm going to go into one of my documents. So I'll go to evaluation templates and let me go into observation. I don't know if I have one. Well, I'll use this one. We'll see. The first thing when you go to edit a template, it starts out on the template information tab, and this is where you need to make sure that your framework is selected. If your framework's not selected, you won't even be able to tag the questions. So this tells it which questions we're going to see or which dimensions we're going to see. So I want to make sure that all of my documents are tagged to the framework, and then I would save it. And now I'm going to go over to my edit template tab, and I'm going to go into each one of my questions, and I'm going to click on that. I can tell these are matrix questions because they have the 3 little gold boxes, and I'm going to click on the rows. And this is what we saw before. You can see that this one has, the way this matrix was set up, it has a different dimension in each question. So here's 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 in the list. But if I wanted to edit one of them, I would double click on it. That puts the question up here where I can edit it. I would select the correct dimension, and then I would say update row to make sure that that's done. And I want to see the number and the words behind that dimension for each one of my questions, so I would go through the whole document. If I have a comments question, then I'm going to click on that comments question, and here I have to make a decision. For this comment, it's under domain 1, but it could relate to any of the dimensions. So do I put all of the dimensions in that one so it's going to show up for all 4 no matter what I wrote? Or do I not tag it? What do I do? We are looking into the option of having a way to tag it to a domain rather than a specific dimension, so that you could have domain comments that don't show up in every dimension. But right now you have to pick the specific dimension. But that's how you would do it for a comments or a checkbox question. So if I had a checkbox question, the same thing would be true. I would click on the checkbox. I don't know if I have any. Yeah, I would click on the checkbox, and then I would tag it to the correct dimension here and say update. So you want to make sure that all of your questions, whether they're comments boxes, check boxes, or matrix questions, they are all tagged to a dimension. And that does 2 things for you. It puts all of that data in the summative panel, and it also puts that data in your analytics. For those of you who may not be familiar with the summative panel, I'm going to go in and show you what that does. If I go into one of my users, and I'm going to pretend that I'm going to do a summative on this teacher. So I'm going to come down here and click on summative and choose the one I want to use. He is a science teacher, and I'm going to create the evaluation. What it will show is over on the right-hand side, all of the domains and dimensions that are associated with this teacher, and I can click on any of them and see everything that has been tagged to that dimension for this teacher throughout the year. So if he had a goal related to communication, it would be up at the top. What I'm seeing here is walkthrough data. This is all walkthrough data. Observed or not observed is a walkthrough document. I don't have an observation on him yet, but he did attend some professional development related to domain 2.3. I can go back and click on another one and see what do we have for 2.5. We have walkthrough data, and we have professional development. So anything that was selected for this teacher throughout the year, here's one that he had a goal related to. it's going to show up in that summative panel. What makes it show up in the summative panel is being tagged, and that's also what makes it show up in the appraisal analysis in the reports that we've been looking at. So to get the data, you want to go into each one of your documents and make sure that each one of the questions is tagged, regardless of what kind of question it is. That will make the data show up in those two places where you want to be able to access it. And then the last slide here, and whoo, that's bright. Those links are bright, but these are links, and I'll put this in a PDF document, and it will be attached to your email following up from this webinar of where to find the information you need for what we've done today. So we have an article out there about building your frameworks, if you need to do that for some of your groups, about tagging your questions to make sure that everything shows up in the summative and in the analysis, and then about using the analytics. So everything that we did today, how you go in and do those settings, that's out there. If I click on that link, it's going to take me to our online help and straight to that framework analysis article, so that you can see these are the different boxes that we looked at today, how you'll choose your framework, select your dimensions, select your area of focus. This is everything that we did in the webinar today to set that timeline and pick your different groups. So you've got an article out there with screenshots for everything that we talked about today. The recording of today's webinar will be on our online help and also in the email that you receive this afternoon or this evening. I don't know how many hours it takes for it to come out. Any final questions?
I just sneezed like 100 times. I'm sorry. This pollen is blowing in right now, I think.
Sorry.
It's okay. Um, there's just been a few questions, people with some individual issues, and I've
Okay.
recommended they contact us at training and we can look over some things. But I just wanted to say, like, there are some questions that have come in because they're not seeing tables, and I've just done like a precursory look at what their settings are in some of these districts. And if you could just review that again, like if they are not using a matrix group, if they're not going to see that table, the
Exactly.
chart, and if they're using checkboxes for their evaluation documents, how that data looks. And it was on one of your slides.
Yeah, it is. So I'll go back and show that really quickly. So these graphs, the bar charts, like what we're seeing on the right-hand side here, those come from matrix type questions. And a matrix type question, when I go into my settings and I look at a document, I'm going to go to evaluation templates and I'm going to go to observations, and I'm just going to grab that one we were looking at. Where is it? There we go. When I'm looking at a document to edit, these gold boxes, that means it's a matrix question. And so when I click on that, it's going to have columns and rows. And if it has columns and rows, then it's going to generate this kind of chart, because this comes from columns and rows. When I'm in my template, if I see a comments question, it's going to look like this. If I see a check box question, it's going to look like this. So my checkbox questions are going to be different, and they display differently. They don't have a column and a row, so they're going to display like what you see here. It's going to list each checkbox item and the percentage for that checkbox. So in this case, for dimension 2.1, I have 4 look fors in that whole dimension. So I have 4 5s, 4 4s, 4 3s, 4 2s, and 4 1s, because that number is the rating. 5 is distinguished, 4 is accomplished, 3 is proficient, 2 is developing, 1 is improvement needed. So this top one provides opportunities for students to establish high academic, social, emotional. That's the number one look for at a 5 rating. Down here provides opportunities for students to establish high expectations for themselves. That's number one look for at a 4 rating. The first 3 sets academic expectations that challenge all students. That's the number 1 look for at a 3 rating. So it's going to list all of them out individually rather than the whole thing summarized for you and give you the percentages there. So depending on how your documents are set up, that's going to determine your displays. So that's why I said when you're trying to figure out, are you getting the data that you want, the first thing to look at is your document types. Are you comparing apples to apples? Do you have matrix questions compared to matrix questions? That's the only way you're going to see bars on both. So if your walkthroughs don't use a matrix, your walkthroughs are going to display differently, and you might be looking at something like this. This is a walkthrough on the left and an observation on the right. The other thing that could prevent you from seeing the data is if you don't have your questions tagged. So you could have a matrix question that's showing up blank with no data because nothing is tagged to it. So you may be looking at a blank graph and saying, but I know I've appraised people. Yes, but are all of your questions tagged? So those are the things that you have to look at to determine, are you getting what you're supposed to be getting out of that analysis? And if you're not, and you think you should be, like Joel said, send an email to training@eduphoria.net, and one of us can go in and take a look at the settings and see if we can find whatever issues are keeping it from displaying the way you want it to display.
Right. That's the key, too. We did have a question of who is the person I should contact? And I said, well, that will be Paige and I.
That's right. So
email at training.
Yeah, the easiest way is to send it to training@eduphoria.net because we both look at that, and it's first come, first serve, although Joel is a hog because he thinks it's a competition and he likes to take the tickets, but it'll go to one of us if you send it to training@eduphoria.net, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Right. And the reason it is set up that way is if I'm out doing a training and you have a quick question, and if you email me directly, it's going to sit in my inbox until I'm done with that training and I'm done driving back home or whatever I'm at. But if it goes into training, there's several of us that can look at it and answer it faster than emailing someone directly.
Absolutely.
I don't have any final questions coming in, and I think our time is almost out.
It is. We're out of time, so I did want to flip over to the final slide. If you're not receiving updates already, you can go to eduphoria.net/news, and you'll find, scroll down a little bit, you'll find this form that you can fill out and sign up to receive email notifications. We send out email blasts when we have a webinar coming up, when we have a new update to our software, when there's some news that you need to know. And we hope that there's at least somebody from each district receiving the updates, but there can be as many people from any district as is helpful to you. So if you want to get those, you can go and sign up there. And finally, thank you for attending today, and I hope y'all have a happy 2019, and will join us for our next webinar, which I'm not sure of the date, but I can look by going to our online help and going to Eduphoria and training and webinars and our upcoming webinars section. And the next one is January 16th, and it's going to be new test authoring. So that's going to be an AWARE webinar coming up January 16th.
Are you doing that webinar, Paige?
I am not doing an AWARE webinar. That will be Jason that will be Jason and Jenny.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you for your time this afternoon, and we look forward to training again in the future.